Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to our DHAsia webinar series. I think today is the seventh. My name is Jaehyun Lee, and then I teach Korean literature and digital humanities at Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology in Korea. As you know, this webinar is organized and run by a group of DH scholars interested in Asia, including Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, uh, India, and Korea, and more. And then I would like to thank again everyone involved, especially Setsuko here. She's the main engine here. On behalf of Korean Association for Digital Humanities, so let me introduce our speaker and a moderator. So Dr. Jungmin Yoo is assistant professor at the College of Liberal Arts and a director of ICON's Center for Digital Humanities at Yonsei University. And her primary research lies in the 18th century Korean poetry and the history of the book. Jamie received her PhD in Sino-Korean literature and digital humanities from Harvard University. And then I did her postdoctoral research at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing, China. And there are two more presenters here, Changhee Lee and then Kiho Song. I guess that Jamie introduced them later. And our moderator is Dr. Timothy Tangherlini, is a professor in the Department of Scandinavian at the UC Berkeley. His research focuses on the computational approaches to problems in study of folklore, literature, and culture. He has played a significant role in the development of a field of cultural analytics at the UC Berkeley and co-directing the three-year program at the NSF's Institute for Pure and Applied Mathematics. Additionally, he led an NEH Institute for Advanced Topics in Digital Humanities or Network Analysis for Humanities. So today's title is Tu Fu in Paratexts, an analytical reading of literary intertextuality in Chosån Korea. So, and then as far as I understand it, today's presentation will last 25 to 30 minutes. And then Professor Tangherlini give us a discussion a bit later, and then audience questions will follow. Then without further ado, well, let's get it started. Please welcome Professor Yoo with Jamie with a big applause.
Professor Tangherlini, thank you very much. Do you want to give a few words before the talk started? No? Should I just start?
I think you should just start. I think we're all here to hear this wonderful talk, so looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Lee, for your kind introduction. Professor Tangherlini, it's great to see you here. Let me share the screen. Can you see this full screen? Okay. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Jamie. Thank you for allowing me to share my research at this wonderful venue. Today, I've also invited my co-authors, Kiho Song and Changhee Lee. As some of you may know, this talk is based on our paper, Intertextual Dufu, published last year. It took long to complete the paper, but I have to admit that it's really experimental. So I really appreciate your generous comments. So I'm a literary scholar working on 18th century Korean literature with comparative studies in Chinese and world literature. Although I'm a still relative beginner in the field, I'm a passionate advocate for literary humanities. Let me share how I came to know the field and why I have embraced it as a research method. What makes, let me move this a little bit here. What makes Korean literature Korea? It has been the central question of my research since my graduate studies. My journey through multiple countries, including the United States, China, and Korea, has been crucial in shaping my understanding of cultural identity formation. I was born and raised in Seoul, Korea, and later moved to the United States for my PhD in pre-modern Korean poetry from broader comparative perspectives. About the time About the time when I started in my graduate studies, I was once shown two books, one from Korea's Korea dynasty and the other from Wien, China, both written in literary Chinese. Someone asked, what are the quintessential differences between them? Many societies in pre-modern East Asia, including Vietnam, Japan, Korea, and China, used the literary Chinese for mainstream scholarly writings. At the same time, vernacular of each society, such as Korean alphabet, remained in existence through multiple interaction with the classical Chinese. In this environment of DHAsia, where can you demarcate between Korean and foreign literature? This question, which I had never considered before, sparked my interest in how writers in Chosån established their literary identity. This research question led me into the world of sociology of literature and subsequently to the methods used in digital humanities. At the time, for me, digital humanities involved social network analysis and GIS, which are main methods for CBDB. After taking a series of courses in network analysis and cultural geography, I became fascinated by the potentials of network analysis in literary studies. Firstly, it was thrilling to discover patterns within the data. If applied to literature, I believed it could reveal diverse interpretations beyond the mere chronological order or canonical significance. Secondly, this method adapted at handling small data, not just large data sets. This allows for greater control over data quality, even with limited amounts of data. Meaningful results can be anticipated. So, the topic of today is Du Fu in Paratexts, an analytical reading of literary intertextuality in Chosån Korea. Du Fu is a historical figure from 8th century China. As Du Fu's poetry spread across the centuries, however, he also became a literary canon. His poems remained unchanged, but the packaging, such as the form of the book, have been changed. For the past few years, I have conducted extensive archival research on various versions of Du Fu in Korea beyond. At Yonsei University, I encountered the remarkable version of Du Fu's poetry in the Rare Book Archive. I'd like to call it my Da Vinci Code moment. The book is titled 두율부는, which translates to Poetry of Du Fu categorized by rhyme. This specific version, printed in woodblock, this is publisher has been located in the Daegu area, southeast of Korea. As stated on the cover page, the headnotes in the margin, meticulously handwritten by anonymous readers, particularly caught my attention. I questioned whether these were personal reflection of the readers or if they are derived from other scholarly references. I decided to contextualize the book historically and analyze it using network analysis. In the process, I have had a few very fortunate opportunities to collaborate with two remarkable colleagues. Kiho, a PhD candidate in sociology, excels in mathematical analysis of networks. Changhee, a PhD candidate in Korean literature, has already published multiple articles on Du Fu. This is a background story. As for the history of Du Fu's reception, Changhee will present the detail. So, Changhee will introduce the reception of Du Fu. Just a moment. Unmute yourself.
Sorry. Du Fu's literary works were meticulously categorized following conventions prevalent in East Asia. And this was done in three primary ways. First, his poems were organized chronologically, arranged in the order of the dates they were created. Second, a thematic classification was used, where his poems were grouped into categories based on their subjects, such as music, animals, historical sites, and travelogues. The final method of categorization focused on the poetic form, compiling Du Fu's verse into groups such as pentasyllabic regulated verses, heptasyllabic regulated verses, and regulated couplets. Du Fu's poetry gained significant admiration among the Chosŏn literati alone, largely due to its resonance with Neo-Confucianism, the ideological foundation of the Joseon dynasty. Many of Du Fu's poems explore themes of loyalty and patriotic devotion, which are central to Confucian values. As a result, Du Fu, rather than his contemporary Li Bai, was held in high esteem by the central governments and was seen as a model poet worthy of emulation. This reverence led to the widespread publication and circulation of his poetry collections. In Chosŏn Korea, the skill of composing poetry was considered essential for scholars. Poetry composition played a significant role in diplomatic interactions, particularly in exchanges with Chinese envoys. Furthermore, proficiency in poetry was a vital component of the civil service examination system, which was the primary pathway to government service. This emphasis on poetry mastery meant that from a young age, Joseon literati were encouraged to view Du Fu's poems as models of literary excellence. His work became a standard against which their own poetic endeavors were measured and inspired. Understanding Du Fu's poetry definitely necessitated a grasp of the historical context in which these poems were written. Additionally, Du Fu's innovative use of language and the complex structures his poems pose substantial challenges to Joseon scholars. To aid in this intellectual endeavor, the Joseon government facilitated the importation of various commentaries on Du Fu's poetry. Despite the availability of multiple commentaries on Du Fu's poetry, inconsistencies among them often led to confusion among scholars. Recognizing this issue, King Sejong instructed the scholars of Hall of Worthies, a lawyer research institute, to compile a standardized commentary on Du Fu's poetry. The project initiated by King Sejong involved a comprehensive effort to compile a standardized commentary on Du Fu's poetry, titled Chanju Bunyu-dushi. This endeavor includes collecting various interpretations, correcting errors, and organizing the poems thematically. The Joseon government's initiatives went further than just creating a standardized commentary, ultimately leading to the development of the standard translation. A further advancement was made with the publication of Dushi Onhae, the first vernacular translation of Du Fu's poetry. This translation, based on the previously compiled Chanju Bunyu-dushi, was a significant national initiative aimed at making Du Fu's works more accessible to a broader audience. Consequently, collections of Du Fu's poetry published in Joseon were predominantly organized thematically, aligning with the structured approach of the Chanju Bunyu-dushi. During King Jeongjo's reign in the 18th century, a unique anthology of Du Fu's poetry was published, addressing a specific gap, how these works were previously compiled. King Jeongjo observed that no existing collections have categorized the poems by rhyme. It suggests that organizing Du Fu's poems into rhyme categories would deepen the understanding of prosody. In response to this insight, he directed scholars to compile the Duyul-Bun-un. This anthology was notable for its focus on rhyme without the inclusion of a commentary, allowing readers to focus exclusively on the rhyming aspects of the poems. Consequently, anyone studying Du Fu's poetry from this anthology would need to reference earlier commentaries for deeper insights, a practice indicated by the headnotes found in the margins of each page.
Okay, let me discuss the data issues. In the context of intellectual legacy, we aim to understand how the anonymous readers of this Yonsei version of Du Fu's poetry engaged with the text over the centuries. We explored the deliberate intertextual connections between the text to see how the readers interacted with the poems and their accompanying commentaries. We are working with the three main texts for this study. The first, the Yonsei version of Duyul-Bun-un, serves as our primary data set. It contains 777 poems organized by rhyme categories without official commentaries. Instead, each poem includes headnotes written by anonymous readers. Second key text is Chanju Bulyodushi from the 15th century, which featured 1,470 poems, arranged thematically and accompanied by extensive commentaries. We've examined other major commentaries from the 15th to 18th century, but it appears that Chanju was the principal, if not the only, source consulted by the 18th century readers studying Du Fu. The third text here, 규장전은, is the rhyme book published in the 18th century. It's worth noting that in Duyul-Bun-un, our main body of text, all commentaries were removed and the poems were rearranged by rhyme. Understanding these rhyme patterns is crucial, not only to understand the book itself, but also reading the reading practices of time. As a key analytical tool, let me move this a little bit again. We employ the citation network analysis in order to reveal the structural relationship among the poems, the headnotes, the commentaries, and the rhymes. This approach might seem digital and quantitative, yet it aligns well with the classical poetry studies, especially its deciphering literary allusions. Writers often embedded multiple meanings in a poem's characters or lines, challenging readers to translate literary allusions by unfolding embedded codes. In our study, we ran co-citation networks and bibliographic coupling to identify which traditional knowledge was frequently cited by the readers. Here are the basic rules for data construction. Our data comprises 777 poems and 50 annotators, forming a two-mode network. The rhymes and the themes were applied as attributes. By projecting this onto a one-mode network, we measure the relationships among poems and annotators. The network data revealed that annotators were cited on average about 30 times, while each poem had approximately 1.94 annotators. Our analysis uncovered the distinct clusters and patterns in how readers interacted with the text. For more in-depth analysis, Kiho will now take over the podium. Analysis part. Kiho, are you ready? Yes.
Yes. So in this study, we employed network analysis, particularly citation network analysis, to reveal previously unrecognized interpretive traditions associated with anonymous readers. we discovered that the reader's approach to interpreting a significant literary canon of the era was evident in the headnotes. Our analysis highlighted that these headnotes are a valuable resource for understanding the connections between the main body of poetry and the annotators referenced in the notes. This illustrates the power of network analysis, especially in identifying the underlying structure of relationships. In the figures presented, we visualize a network of 777 poems constructed from the two-mode network of poems and annotators described before. In the two figures, each poem is represented as a circle or a node in network analysis. The size of node corresponds to the number of annotators cited in that particular poem's headnote. The lines connecting the nodes, known as edges, indicate specific relationships between the poems. An edge between two nodes indicates shared annotators cited in the headnotes of both poems. The edge thickness and color intensity increases with the number of annotators commonly cited between two connected poems. The node colors denote specific attributes. In the left figure, the nodes are colored by the clusters derived from hierarchical clustering analysis. This analysis groups poems that are likely to cite common annotators, meaning that poems within the same cluster are colored identically. In the right figure, the nodes are colored by 28 different rhymes, with a legend provided at the bottom right of the figure for reference. This visual distinction highlights that the rhyme classification of the poems does not align with the clusters identified through the hierarchical clustering, which is based on similarities in citation patterns. This difference suggests that the citation network analysis has uncovered so-called invisible clusters of poems that are distinct from the traditional formal classification systems like rhyme. This leads us to question, did the readers consider rhyme classification when engaging with the poems? While we cannot definitely answer this, we found the differences between the reader's interpretive approach observed and the formal rhyme classification system, which implies distinct modes of literary understanding. So the next figure I'm presenting is a network of 50 annotators constructed from the same material. The visualization rules are consistent with the previous figures. In this network, each node represents an annotator, and the node size corresponds to the frequency of citations in the headnotes. Notably, there are three large nodes at the center. These represent the annotators most frequently cited by the readers. An edge between two annotators indicates that they are cited together in the headnotes of one or more poems. The edge gets thicker if two annotators are more frequently cited together in the headnotes. The node colors represent the clusters derived from hierarchical clustering. The analysis groups annotators who are likely to be cited together in headnotes, and annotators within the same cluster share the same color. We believe these clusters represent the latent knowledge base of the readers, which, though invisible, can be identified through network analysis. In addition, the three largest nodes in the center belong to the same cluster, indicating that they are likely to be cited together. This suggests that anonymous readers not only relied heavily on the three annotators, but also frequently cited them together, thereby achieving a deeper understanding of each poem in the literary canon.
So our analysis part ends here, but what we hope to discuss further at the Q&A session later. So let me go to the discussion part here. First one is identity formation. At the beginning of the talk, I discussed the formation of identity, what makes Korean literature Korean. By exploring the active interaction between the text and the reader's prior knowledge, we maintain that meaning is produced through reading practices rather than residing in the text itself. I once joked, the historical Dufu is obviously Chinese, but Dufu as a literary figure could be Korean or Japanese, depending on the reader's interpretation. Citation network analysis explored the interaction between readers and the text. Our team experimented with co-citation networks and bibliographic coupling, but if you have any other ideas, please share your thoughts, because under the citation network, there are so many different methods. And the conclusion might sound very simple. The 18th century readers were deeply influenced by the intellectual tradition of the 15th century, particularly in the interpretation of Changhee. Moreover, the editorial intention of King Jeongjo didn't quite resonate when readers applied the thematic categories while reading 두율부는. In this case study, we used citation network analysis to understand how 18th century readers made meaning from their readings. I look forward to hearing more about your thoughts and further developing this method. And the second thing is, I'd like to discuss this issue of textual variance when you get data from the East Asian text. In fact, this project took almost 3 years to complete. It might look simple, but actually it was not. The reason was the data. Of course, Dufu's poem could easily be downloaded from an existing database, but all other materials had to be manually entered. There are metal typeset editions, woodblock versions, manuscripts, and unstructured dictionaries as well. The Chinese character codes are not always standardized. So I'd like to learn more about this aspect of textual variance. This wraps up our presentation. Thanks so much for listening. We'd like to hear your opinions and respond to any question you might bring up. So should I stop share here?
Sure, we might loop back to some of your slides, but that was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
So I think my role is as moderator to sort of open up some of the questioning and make some comments if I've understood my role correctly, and then to moderate the questions that many of you probably have about this truly fascinating work. And I wanted to sort of jump into some of my thoughts on this. I like this work a lot, but of course, as Jamie knows, network analysis is near and dear to my heart. And although all my work in Korean studies was much more contemporary, I'm fascinated by this earlier literary history of Korean literature and the way you form communities of readers. And I think network analysis is really one of the ways that we can start to get at these latent patterns of communities that are hiding kind of in plain sight. So I like the idea that we're teasing out something here that's actually in the texts, but if you're just reading them in the way that we tend to read, we might miss the latent signals that are creating different communities of interpretation. I like the use of co-citation analysis and bibliographic coupling methods. I think that's a novel way of doing this because, in effect, that's what's going on here. It's a form of meta discourse and meta referencing across and within these texts. And I think this is probably one of the first scales of analysis, and you can probably build on that by increasing the consideration of other texts that have been annotated in the same way by some of these same annotators, and maybe there'll be a different topology of that network of annotation, or it might be that we start to find, some sort of community of knowledge that's becoming emergent in these practices of both reading and annotating. I was curious if you've thought about things like pragmatics and indexicality, with the idea that the text can be seen as an ongoing participant in this social linguistic process. So that would kind of bring in dynamics as well, so that there isn't a static element to interpretation, even though we're looking at a snapshot of interpretation. I'm sure different audiences, as they read both the texts and the annotations, start to change over time. And I was wondering if there'd be a way to capture that. So that's really my first big and probably unanswerable question, but it's something that every time I've heard you speak, Jamie, about this work, and as I've read more of it, I've been thinking about how do you bring in this dynamic element, because even you and your team, you're incredibly Changhee and Kiho, your work all together. This is great teamwork. I'm really impressed. I love it. But even the work that you're doing is a form of annotation, right? You are doing another sort of level of annotation as well. I think some of my other questions are probably pretty predictable and easy to answer. I was curious if you were able to find, beyond the annotators, you mentioned these idea of the readers, right? So you've got the text, you've got the annotations, and then you've got the readers. Is there a way of capturing the readers themselves in this? Then I wanted to know if there were any surprises. You kind of answered this already. In the cluster of annotators that you found, and I was also I was intrigued, honestly, when I read it first. I didn't kind of catch it, but when you presented it, I caught that differentiation between the fact that this work has been classified according to rhyme, but it's annotated according to something completely different. And that's what you've captured there. And I think that's actually a huge takeaway from this work. You say that, the conclusions are not that important. I think you actually bring a huge conclusion to this. It's the readers aren't reading this classified according to rhyme. They're reading it against some tradition of annotation. And that the rhyme is, in some ways, it's a red herring, right? Even though it's been organized according to rhyme, clearly from the annotation, that's not what's going on there. So I think that's fantastic. And then I wanted to know about some future directions for this work. So those were my 3 to 8 questions. I'm not sure how many I had in there, but as you were talking, I kept adding to it. So I apologize. I'm catching perhaps a little bit off guard.
Should I start?
Yes,
Thank you very
please.
much.
Dive in.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions and also insight sharing for sharing your insight. So in this paper, actually, I originally thought, when I found that material, I thought, oh, maybe this person might have had the access to new interpretation in 18th century, because there are so many vibrant interaction between Korea and China. But when we searched the origins of the notes, he heavily relied on the 15th century interpretation. That was surprisingly disappointing. That was also very interesting. But also he didn't follow the rule of the King Jongjo. So it's just kind of double layered. Actually, so he was not follow the new trend, but he didn't follow the Jongjo's order. So it's a double layered. That was very interesting, your findings here. So that was one finding. So
Yeah, it's almost like a resistant reading. It's almost like a new way of reading the
Right.
old with the new with the old new, something like that. I mean, so it's switching back and forth. So it wasn't what you expected, but I think that's in some ways
right.
that's the finding.
Right. So Yes, the second thing is speaking of in the new interpretation, he was really heavily relying on the 15th century interpretation, and among the 15th century interpretation, 15th I'm letting in some 15th century interpretation. Actually, he really still respect the tradition of Confucianism, actually, because he cited a lot of Chemong Pil, who was highly regarded during the 15th century. So he's in line of the Confucian tradition. That's also a very interesting fact, because he's still in line of the very 15th century Confucian tradition, interpretive tradition. And another thing is that about the latent knowledge basis, maybe Kiho maybe will be added more a little bit later, latent knowledge basis about the hierarchical clustering later, maybe later. About the future direction, I want to develop this one into the two different direction. First one is I want to add more data because I want to see the reception of Doof in Korean literary history, because this work I want to see. I saw the Doof and the notes of the Korean writers, but I really want to see how the reading of the Doof reflected their composition of their own poets, actually. So I want to add more data. But honestly, adding the data is painfully difficult, because I have do this everything is by hands. And another thing is making this relation data for the natural analysis. I had to create a lot of single tables of the relational data. That means the single tables do not have association if I don't make the association manually. Do you know what I mean? Each relational data table do not have an association each other. So my plan, I'm working on making ontology of the semantic data so that I can make a database. So in that case, I can make a kind of search system by making the semantic data map there. So I'm working on the ontologies database system these days. After making the database system, I can add more convenient to add more data in the system. Then it's easy to make a relational data there, because to make this relation database, it took 3 years to complete. So it took so long. So that's the direction of this.
Yeah. People don't appreciate how long it takes to get our humanities data into shape. I mean, I've been working on the same database since 1985. I'm halfway there. And then I think one of the other things that you'll be able to do is put a little bit more information on the edges. And so right now we've got a lot of information on the nodes, and there's a lot of information in those edges. And I'd really be interested in learning what kinds of information you can get on those edges that will help us understand those relationships. So sort of focusing a bit on the features of the edges is going to be an interesting addition to this. You've got a lot of work ahead of you.
Kiho, do you want to add some more about the latent knowledge structure?
Sure. I think maybe some of you who are familiar with bibliometrics already know invisible colleges discussion in that field. But for those who are not familiar with this, I'd like to talk about this shortly. So we use the term like invisible or latent, and we adopted the term from the term invisible college in bibliometrics. The term refers to an informal network of researchers who frequently collaborate and communicate with each other, and typically through correspondence, conferences, and co-authorship of academic papers. So these networks are called invisible because their structure and interactions are not formalized or necessarily apparent, such as institutions or affiliations where scholars belong. But rather, invisible structure is identified by analyzing communication or publication patterns. So analytical methods such as citation network or bibliographic coupling we use can be used to analyze patterns of publication and citation to uncover these invisible networks, so helping to understand how knowledge is created and spread among scholars. And of course, I admit that the context I just described is quite different from how anonymous readers in the 18th century Joseon dynasty relied on important annotations, cited annotators, and achieved their own understanding of literary canon. However, I believe that our experimental study to reveal invisible knowledge base of anonymous readers can shed light on new ways of understanding reading practices and interpretive traditions of the era. And in addition to Jamie's answers, I'd like to say that of course, every study has limitation and at the same time, the future direction of our study is that we use the single material with headnotes. So if we were able to acquire other sources with existing annotations to study Dufu poetry from the same period, if possible, we could construct several such networks and consider different analytical approach to compare or integrate them. For example, someone may want to calculate the centrality of which poems or annotators were important in the constructed multiple networks. We could measure centrality with the current network, but I thought it was so obvious which annotators were cited heavily that it was not necessary. However, this approach could be a new direction for future development if we were to compare multiple sources that study the poetry by citing annotators with the same citation style but different content. And also, I believe that our approach can be extended and applied to other kinds of ancient texts, not necessarily to analyze citation patterns as long as they are annotated and cite annotators. Uh, Furthermore, I think in the middle of our journey for this study, I also thought of kind of genealogy of knowledge, uh, including if we can add some time information to our data so that we can differentiate the temporal order of knowledge transfer from the past to the future so that we can identify what were branches of knowledge and what was important and who were important annotators. That kind of things could be our future direction, especially in terms of methodology.
So, right, if you add more different kinds of different groups of annotators, different schools of people, so it will be, yeah, we will have a very interesting result, I guess.
And you might start to find some topological motifs in the network that are incredibly informative, right? So there might be certain types of clicks, there might be certain types of patterns that tell us something about annotation and creation and circulation of knowledge in this period. And then the reliance, I think, on the 15th century is just fascinating. So you might find other historical patterns as well.
Right, right.
Should we move on to questions from the floor?
Yes, I'm gonna open the floor to all now.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Shall I give some question? Thank you very much for intriguing and wonderful presentations. Just, I mean, this perspective of citation networks, I guess, will help us revisit the practice of reading and the history of the book and the history of reading during the Joseon Dynasty. And then in relation to that, I have a question about like whether when the annotators like use the head notes, the cite wonder the direction of citation is important. For instance, like I guess when annotator A cite the poem A, and then annotator B cited the same poem later. Wonder this kind of order is important in your citation network, or is it? I mean, the direction of edges is that is it important in your in the reading practice during the Joseon Dynasty? And that's the first question, and then the other another one is when the annotators put the head notes, wonder whether they use like keywords that are often frequently used in the head notes. So if you can find some those keywords, then you can put together. You can use those keywords to create the another type of citation network. So I'm just curious whether you use the title of the wonder. I mean, in the key words in the head note, in your citation network later.
Jiyeon, thank you for the question. Could you elaborate the second question a little bit more? The
head note, when you said you use the head note as a material for a citation network. Did you type all the like sentences there, and use the some words as
keywords actually?
keywords? Yes.
Yes, I can show actually that's our spreadsheet. Actually, can you see that?
Sure.
Actually,
Yeah.
we typed all the titles,
Yeah.
and then it's manually. It's really tedious job. Actually, it's also handwritten.
Oh
So
my
we
gosh.
actually decipher the handwritten notes and the type. Actually, we have a small amount of money from the 연구재단. So so ask other outside people, 단국대 people, get them typed. And then Changhee has a heavy duty work, and compare them with some 천지분류듯이 and other notes.
Right.
And compare this note with the other commentators like Wang So, and then manually compare these head notes to the other people. So yes, that's how I work for the head notes. That's the answer for
Thank you
you.
very much for detailed information how you build up the data
Yes.
set.
And the first question is the directionality of the network. I don't think the directionality was important because there was one guy on the head note. Actually, I think there's multiple readers because in the paper we used the plural form for the readers, but actually the thing based on the style of the consistency of the writing style, I think there was only single reader. But what do you think, Kiho? Because the directionality is not that important when you understand the citation at this point. So I think there was a single reader at this point, I think.
So for the first question, actually, there is no directionality in network data from the first place because there only exists a relationship, association between each poem and annotator cited in the headnotes, but there is no direction from poem to annotator or annotator to poem, and also there is no directionality among the poems or annotators, their networks. So we cannot consider directionality in this context, in this data. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hey, if I can ask a question. Hi, Jimmy.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Oh, hi. This is Chen from National University of Singapore. So hi, Jamie and I were the like classmates during our PhD years. And so I work on letters, how Chinese letters were circulated or printed throughout pre-modern East Asia. So what you presented today is really so fascinating. So I guess I have a question about when you mentioned how the origins of these citations are from the 15th century, but from the chart you just showed us, all those commentators, some of those were from 12th century China. So some of the actual authors of the 15th century commentators were commentaries from even earlier centuries China, like Zhao Cigong or Zhang Xiaoxiang. So were they part of the commentaries of Dufu poetry that were reprinted or circulated in 15th century Chosŏn?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, it's all compiled. It's a big compiled in the 15th century in Chanju Dushi. Before that, we have a huge genealogy. As Changhee presented, we have the genealogy, history of genealogy before 15th century. So all the commentaries got compiled in the 15th century in the Chanju Dushi. Let me share the again. So,
I see.
so all the books got compiled. Oh, sorry.
This one.
This one, right?
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, this here we just Changhee, do you want to introduce? But I can do that too.
Okay. Yeah. I got it. So my question is, was it mainly because even from Tang and Song dynasty, these were the major commentators?
Yes. So the interesting thing is that the Dufu was canonized during the Song dynasty,
Right.
as you know. So Korean Dufu was kind of Song dynasty version, that Tang dynasty version. So Korean Dufu got already canonized during the Song dynasty. So Korean Dufu is really perfect, actually. So it's a very annoyingly perfect in terms of formal regulation. And the commentary wise, there are some very, like Changhee said, some variants. But during the King Sejong dynasty, King Sejong said, oh, there are some variants. So he compiled and made the perfect version of the canonized version of the commentary books. We call it Chanju Bulryudushi here. Yes.
I see. So
we have a Korean
because
translation. Yeah.
so are you saying even the other poems that were not selected here were filtered out? Or like the actual works of poems were there, but only commentator pieces were selected and passed down?
In terms of poetry, King Sejong tried to include all the poetry actually, but
Okay.
commentary wise, that he selected.
Yes. I see. So he sort of edited Dufu's image through the commentaries he selected.
Yeah, commentaries is selected. Yes.
Okay.
Based on his editorial standards.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I would be interested to know what are the parts or facades of Dufu that were edited out.
Oh, right.
So that is, if we read other trends of commentaries or other schools of commentaries, how would that image be different from this lineage of commentaries that you analyze?
Right.
So yeah, but thank you for the clarification. Now it's very clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's very nice to see you here.
Yeah.
Satsuko.
I have a question about the data preparation procedures. So I imagine when you are, making the data, preparing a spreadsheet, taking 3 years to do so, I imagine there were some executive decisions that needed to be made, be it cleaning of data, restructuring of data. Can you share some of those moments and what what got omitted, what got cleaned out, what were the kind of discussions you might have had. And I ask thinking the way how the data is prepared is going to foundationally affect the kind of consequent computational analysis that you can do.
Wow.
So if there were any moments of discussions.
So I really need your advice actually. So it's I am really not confident actually. First, actually we downloaded also DHAsia data set from like the Taiwanese website. And after that, 규장전은 is really unstructured. So we typed everything, but there is so really a lot of variance. So we tried to use the UTF-8, but actually there are so many words. It's not included in the UTF-8. So yeah, so Changhee found some commercial shops that can handle the characters. Characters. So we hire the people who can handle the characters. So it's a lot of and also for that we scan it, we OCR it, and after that we manually typed, and then after for the variant we hire the professionals and edit it. And if we cannot figure them out, we just leave them blank. So it's not complete yet, especially for the dictionary, 규장전은 part. It's so famous book. It's a really, really famous book, but it's so surprising that we don't have any digitized version yet. It was so surprising. Yes.
Very interesting. Thank you. I didn't think about the uniqueness of the Chinese characters getting in the way of either transcribing or computing. That's very fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
These are pretty common problems that you encounter, even in places where you think you shouldn't be encountering them. I work with some earlier European languages, and you think you should not encounter problems like this, but you encounter problems like this all the time. And it means that this work is so much more detailed. People say, oh, you're just doing distant reading. It's like, no, we're doing about as close a reading as you possibly can, right? To facilitate multi-scale readings. And I think a lot of that work goes sort of like the latent or the invisible colleges. A lot of the work that goes into this is really invisible, but it's enormous work. And as Setsuko points out, there's a degree of interpretation that you bring to it. Not only domain expertise, but you have to make choices when you're representing something. But it's in some ways no different than the representation that was being done in the 15th century, or the 18th century, or even in the 12th century. So there's always these questions of interpretation, and also why I'm not really worried that AI is going to take our jobs.
People often say they do big data, and I'm really wondering how they do big data, because we really have to clean the data. So
big enough, there's the law of big numbers, and so you solve some problems that way. The problem in the humanities is we don't really do big data. We do what I call medium small data, and medium small data is very hard to work with because it's beyond sort of human comprehension, right? So it's big enough that we can't do it, in sort of analog, but it's not small enough that we can take advantage of certain emergent features of very, very large data sets. So we're really in the sweet spot of really difficult work. And you've shown it here with this. This is spectacular what you've managed to tease out of really some very difficult texts.
thank you.
I don't know what the timing is like. Do we have time for one or two more questions, or?
That's cool. What do you think? It's 1 p.m. here.
Yes. Jaeyoung, what would you say?
Oh, I guess everyone is hungry in Asia now.
I'm just very tired. So
Okay, so thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, and then thank you for all coming to hear Dr. Yoo's talk today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So since we go, we have like other presentations lined up, right? So do you have a time to introduce for the next presentation?
Sure, I can. Thank you once again for the presenters and the moderators and the great discussion Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the next webinar is scheduled to take place on May 21st. You can register from the link at the bottom. And I'm pretty sure that there are many of us in this room who are excited to continue asking questions and having discussions about OCRs, East Asian computational humanities work. If you're keen, you can join us at the Discord channel that we have. And here's the link where you can join us from. That's all the announcements from me.
Once again, thank you very much, and then have a wonderful evening and a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you next time. So bye-bye.
thanks so much for involving me. Thank you. Good night or
Very much.
afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
That's good.